3:27 a.m. My buried ringtone slices the dark. Screen glows one word I haven't said out loud in years. Maya. I answer before my brain can refuse. Mom? Not a memory, not a recording, now. Her whisper is small and awake. Where am I? It's completely dark. My lamp won't catch, my hands won't behave. Maya? I sound like a stranger using my mouth. I can't move, she says. My knees are jammed, fabric on my face. It smells like cedar and lemon oil. There's a little beep every minute, like a watch, but lower. Cedar, lemon oil, minute beep. A building in Cedar Grove knows those 3 notes by heart. Harrigan and Sons, the back hallway, the cedar closet families never see. The line dies. Not a click, just absence. Call back? This number does not exist. Shoes, keys, door. The town sleeps, my card doesn't. Brick columns, trimmed hedges, a heartbeat beat behind the wall. I pounded the side door until Marty Harrigan squinted at my face and stepped aside. Down the staff corridor, past framed landscapes that never blink. The closet opened, cold breath of air. Garment bags like quiet parishioners. There, behind a loose panel, a hidden cavity, a black puck, winking red once a minute, a zipped garment bag. Inside, a charcoal dress and Maya's varsity jacket. Under it, a pink razor asleep like a fish under glass. Next to it, Ping Keep, legacy voicemail relay. If my daughter is 12 years gone, why is her voice calling me from a wall that beeps? I'm done letting other people write the story of my house, my town, my child. I pressed my thumb to the seam and started pulling. Cedar Grove sleeps hard. I rolled through 2 stop signs and clipped the curb by the Methodist church. The funeral home sits by itself at the bend past Old Mill, brick calm, hedges trimmed into something that looks like order. Mr. Harrigan's Buick was there. Someone was inside. I cut the engine and listened to and could hear the beep from the back hallway through the walls, the way you can hear the idea of a train from miles off. I pounded on the side door until the hallway light blinked and footsteps came slow, like someone is reminding you that nothing is urgent in this building. The lock turned, and Mr. Harrigan, Marty to people who have cried in his office, squinted out into the night. Miss Finch, it's nearly 4. His voice came the way he does everything, careful. I need your cedar closet, I said, and it wasn't until the words were out that I realized how crazy they sounded. He studied my face like a man opening a file and deciding how much he wants to know. He stepped aside and held the door a second longer than necessary. The lobby smelled like lilies and furniture polish. The carpet muffled everything like the building preferred to keep its own counsel. He led me down the main hall and then through a locked door into a narrow corridor families never see unless they are lost. The walls were lined with framed landscapes and a little wooden table with a box of tissues tucked into a crystal dish like a promise you didn't ask for. He unlocked the closet with a key that looked older than either of us, and a small breath of cold air came out when the door opened. The cedar glowed faintly from a nightlight. Garment bags hung in a neat row like quiet parishioners. The lemon oil sat in a spray bottle on a shelf, label wiped clean by years of the same hand reaching for it. In the quiet, I could hear the beep. Just once a minute, low and insistent, a metronome teaching a song you don't want to learn. Where it's coming from, he whispered, and I realized he could hear it too. I ran my palm along the back panel. There was a seam where the baseboard didn't sit flush. Has there always been a panel back here? This building was a doctor's house 100 years ago, he said softly. There are crawl spaces and cubbies in the oddest places. He crouched and ran his fingers along the seam. But nothing is installed without me. Can you get it open? He fetched a flathead and a flashlight from a rolling cart people never see unless something has gone wrong. He popped 2 decorative plugs I had always thought were part of the trim. The baseboard loosened, then slid free. A section of paneling swung inward like a magician's secret. Cold air came out. Not the chill of death, but the conditioned cool of a space that had stolen air from somewhere else. The beep was louder. Inside, a narrow cavity ran the length of the closet, 18 inches deep, built for wire and pipe and, apparently, other people's secrets. Someone had slid a garment bag into the cavity and zipped it closed. Taped to the stud alongside it was a black puck the size of a cookie with a red LED flashing once a minute. I reached for the zipper. My fingers shook and I told them to stop because if I was going to be the kind of mother who could answer a call at 3:27 in the morning from a place that doesn't exist, I needed hands that would cooperate. The zipper moved. The garment bag side open. Inside lay a charcoal dress nestled like it had been waiting for a wedding that never came, and underneath, folded with the kind of care that only exists in grief, was Maya's varsity jacket. The white block letters still shouted, Cedar Grove Eagles. The sleeve still carried the black Sharpie scrawl of number 12, state champs. It smelled like cedar now, not her shampoo, and for a second I had to sit on the floor because standing felt like a lie. Under the jacket was a shoebox with a corkboard-colored lid. On the lid lay a pink Motorola Razr, Maya's old phone, the one she bought with babysitting money because she wanted something pretty, and he wanted her to have something durable, and we compromised on a coupon and prayer. It lit for a breath, like a fish surfacing, then went dark. Next to it, the black puck with the blinking red eye read in embossed letters, Pinkeep, Legacy Voicemail Relay. I've seen the ad, I said out loud. Keeps a number alive, pings the carrier so it doesn't get recycled. Mr. Harrigan looked at me like I had told him we had a ghost on the line and an explanation to match. We didn't install this, he said, a tone flat with offense and fear. Nothing gets added without me. My ex handled all the bills that year. He'd have asked for a key to drop off the jacket after the service. Maybe more. Don't tell Dad. I lifted the shoebox. It was heavy the way certain memories are heavy. Less about the weight and more about what it was built to carry. Inside was a spiral notebook with the corners chewed, Maya's silver locket with the hinge dented from the time the chain got caught on the locker latch, a letter in a plain envelope with Lauren in blocky capital letters, and a USB drive taped to a folded insurance policy like something secret that didn't want to get lost. Mr. Harrigan touched the door frame with his fingertips like he needed wood under his skin to keep standing up. We should call the sheriff. We will. And I slid my thumb under the envelope flap, because whatever this was started with my daughter's voice and the scent of cedar, and I was afraid if I let anyone else handle it, I'd lose the thread. Inside were 2 pages of lined paper torn from a school notebook. The first line hit me before my eyes got there, because good writing carries its own momentum. If you're reading this, it means something went wrong, and I was right about the outlet and the dryer vent. We took the USB to Mr. Harrigan's office because it was closer than my house, and I didn't trust myself not to drive off the road. He woke his desktop like a tired horse. The screen came to life with an expanse of green fields that looked like a promise. A folder opened when the drive mounted. Maya_wed_final and a plain text file that said read_me. I clicked the text first because I wanted to know the things she wanted me to know before I watched her mouth shape words again. If this surfaces, it means I was right. Dad keeps telling me not to make noise about the flickering outlet in my room or the hissing smell in the laundry room. He keeps fixing it by resetting the breaker. Miss Hanley from Civics says institutions protect their own. If the worst happens, don't let Dad control the story. Ping Keep was the only thing I could afford with babysitting money. When I clicked the video, the kitchen I had avoided for months after the fire came back to me unburned and familiar. The yellow rooster magnet on the freezer cockeyed, the whiteboard calendar crooked because nothing ever hung straight in that house. Friday's spaghetti sauce bubbling behind her on the stovetop because my life before grief was a life with sauce that needed stirring. She looked straight into the camera, chin lifted the way she did when she wanted to appear braver than she felt. "Hey, Mom," she said, making it sound casual and private, like a note slid under my door. "If you're watching this, something went wrong." She walked down the hall and aimed the phone toward the outlet behind her nightstand. The plate was dark at the top edge, like someone had run a smoky finger up the wall. "I told Dad 3 times," she said. "He said I worry like you and not to embarrass him by calling the landlord because it made him look like he couldn't handle things." She rolled her eyes and then caught herself doing it and smiled into the camera like she wanted to make me smile too. In the laundry room, the phone picked up a faint hiss under the hum. The dryer vent wore a thin black crack along the bend like a smile you don't trust. "Miss Hanley said to document," she said, "so I am." She set the phone on the washer with the front camera still pointed at her and held up a sheet of printer paper that said in Sharpie, "If anything happens, this wasn't an accident." I paused the video and the room held still the way rooms do after something true is said inside them. The quiet had a weight. Mr. Harrigan's careful professional face sank into worry. "Call the sheriff," he said again. And this time, he didn't sound like he was suggesting it to be safe. He sounded like a man who understood a line had been crossed inside his building. Deputy Carla Boone arrived in 10 minutes because she understood the words I used to describe what we found, and because Cedar Grove is the kind of town where if you say the right words at the right time, help comes. She wore a ball cap and the kind of ponytail you can pin back in the dark. She listened the way people listen when they're going to do something with what they hear. She bagged the Pinky puck, the phone, the letter, the USB, my daughter's jacket, and the shoebox, and she called the fire marshal before she called the sheriff, because she understood cause matters where fire is concerned, and because she knew Sheriff Marks played golf with my ex-husband and decided to be strategic about who heard what when. By noon, I was sitting in a chair outside a conference room at the county building with a styrofoam cup of coffee that had already given up. The floor smelled like floor cleaner and sweat. Fire Marshal Adkins opened a box of his own old files like he was opening a book he didn't want to reread. Sheriff Marks walked the hall with his hands in his belt like authority belonged to him because his father put a badge on him once. Deputy Boone brought me regular updates without making me ask, and asked me if I had eaten, and delivered a plastic-wrapped turkey sandwich that someone somewhere called lunch. Inside, they watched Maya's video. I heard the moments when someone said a word through their teeth. I heard the chair legs move when a man shifts because he knows the thing he is about to say will change everything he says after. They called me in when the room had decided on its face. Fire Marshal Adkins looked younger than the last time I saw him, somehow deflated of the surety that had carried him 12 years ago. "Miss Finch, I'm sorry no one listened to you then," he said. "I didn't ask you very many questions," I said, "because grief does not always take the high road, and because plain sentences are how I survive mornings." "We were told the outlet had been repaired prior," he said. "We were told the space heater was near point of origin. The home was bulldozed within 48 hours. I never signed off on that order." His eyes went to Sheriff Marks. Marks rubbed his jaw. Landlord wanted it gone. He stretched the syllables like chewing something too tough. Landlord was Dan's cousin, Deputy Boone said. Not a question. Marks kept his eyes on the table. Everyone was grieving, I said, and I didn't raise my voice because I had saved my volume for the night I screamed into my porch cushion and scared a raccoon out of the hydrangeas. We got the warrant for Dan faster than I expected, because sometimes when a story shifts in a small town, it shifts all at once. Men who had nodded him at church began to frown at their own feet. His cousin folded in a mourning and told Carla everything, how Dan had asked for the bulldozer quick, how he'd said insurance was easier if everyone understood it was a heater, how he told me I was too fragile for details when what he meant was too inconvenient. They found the fixed outlet in his shed, wrapped in an old towel marked with our address in Sharpie like he'd labeled it for a science fair. The receptacle was the cheapest plastic you can buy in bulk from a website no one regulates. The breaker box, bent and blackened at one corner, had been swapped during the week everyone dropped casseroles and wept easily. He'd reset and reset until resetting looked like repair. He'd controlled the story and the pace and the paperwork, and when I asked to see the report, he told me grief scrambled my ability to track facts. He called it kindness. He called it protecting me. When they cuffed him, he looked at me for the first time like I was the person who might decide his day, not the woman he could shape with a tone and a timeline. He had the decency not to pretend surprise. Control collapses quickly under the weight of evidence. "You don't get to spin it anymore," I said. She told me where to look. There are parts of the next week that feel like someone else's story when I say them out loud. Mr. Harrigan hugged me like a person instead of a professional and refused to accept the Tupperware of cookies I tried to bring as apology and comfort. Deputy Boone stopped by my house twice on her way home without work reason. The ladies at the church forgot their complicated feelings about divorce and brought sheet cake and green beans and casserole dishes with our names on masking tape. Miss Hanley from Civics wrote my daughter a letter for the newspaper that made me cry twice and then smile because it sounded like Maya, defiant and tender in the same sentence. The video traveled. People who never cared about breaker boxes cared about signatures and bulldozers and the way a story will change shape if you let one voice tell it alone. A state investigator came, and then a lawyer from Raleigh with a haircut that cost more than the shoes in my closet, and then a man in a suit from a company that once sold us a policy and had not expected to be part of our town's conversation again. "Do you want to sue?" people asked, like Nenny could reframe the thing that took my child. I said I wanted accountability on paper, because paper outlives good intentions. I wanted an apology that made it into minutes, and a policy change that made it into law. I wanted the bulldozer rule to change because the part of me that slept in a funeral home lobby once because no one could convince me to go home knew that if we had lived in a county where houses wait 72 hours before they go down, unless a structural engineer says they'll fall, then someone might have found what Maya left, and I would have had 12 fewer years of thinking my memory of the outlet was the stubbornness of a woman who couldn't move on. Cedar Grove is small, but it understands petitions. We showed up at a county meeting with a line of women and a string of evidence bags and the sound of a beep measured into our sentences. I told them about cedar and lemon oil and a garment bag zipper. Deputy Boone told them about the ping device and how grief makes people buy strange things with babysitting money because they don't trust grown-ups to keep promises. Fire Marshal Atkins held up his own missteps and asked for more eyes on scenes when evidence goes missing in the fog of sympathy. They voted through a moratorium on demolition without a signed release from the fire marshal and at least one day of daylight. People clapped, and it didn't feel like a triumph. It felt like a town giving itself a way to be better. The week of the hearing, the pastor from the church that Dan still attended stopped me in the grocery store near the cereal aisle where the box with the toucan looks like it's listening. He said he had counseled Dan for anger when we were married, that he believed Dan loved his daughter even if he also loved control. He did not ask for my forgiveness because good men sometimes learn words too late. But he told me that if I wanted to speak in his sanctuary, I could, without permission or constraint. I spoke that Sunday afternoon because my mother raised me to use whatever microphone was offered when the truth stood near it waiting. I read a paragraph from Maya's notebook about the girls in her civics class whose parents read their texts without asking. I read a paragraph from my own gut about what it means for a woman's story to be narrated by someone who benefits from her silence. I watched the faces of women my age nod and the faces of men my ex's age shift in their seats. I did not look at the pew where Dan's mother wiped her eyes with a tissue because the only way I could stand at a pulpit in the church where I was married and say my daughter saved us was to look at the back door and picture my girl pushing it open. All week people told me new truths. The landlord cousin told me that when he saw the fire, he tried to drop the price of the bulldozer guy to be nice to Dan. The bulldozer guy apologized to me for living by the schedule of men who pay him. The insurance man swore he had never asked for anything to be hurried. And then I showed him emails where he had strongly suggested that swift resolution satisfies stakeholders. And he looked at his shoes and said something about policy training. In the middle of all of that, as if timing itself had a sense of ceremony, my phone lit up again at 3:27 in the morning. The house was quiet enough that I could hear the ice maker drop a cube downstairs. I answered, and this time the voice that filled my ear did not sound like it was pressed flat by a zipper. It sounded like my daughter when she sat on the counter while I cooked, as if the kitchen had chosen her voice to season the air. "You did it, Mom," she said. "How can my heart keep beating when I hear you?" I asked, because that's what my heart always asks when it remembers it was built to pump and not to name things it cannot carry. She said, "Because I'm in there. You knew it before I did. Tell the girls in Cedar Grove they're not crazy. And tell the moms who keep a box with the notebook and the locket that it's not wrong to keep a string tied around something the world calls gone." "What happens now?" I asked, even though I suspected the answer. Some stories don't end so much as they settle. She said, "Now you sleep sometimes." And I could hear the smile in it, the way she used to smile when she'd hidden a cupcake behind the cereal and wanted me to find it. "Now you drink water. Now you stop apologizing for the volume of your voice." The line went quiet, not dead. Quiet like a lake at dawn, quiet like a room where someone just told the truth. I hung her jacket on the hallway hook instead of keeping it on the back of my bedroom door where memory is an altar you visit but never show the world. I started putting one small thing back into the world every day. A plant on the porch, the pie plate from my neighbor returned with a note and a grocery store bouquet. I walked the loop around the school track and waved at the man who walks his dachshund at the same time because grief isolates and control thrives in isolation, and I had spent 12 years choosing loneliness and calling it penance. I stopped and talked to a girl from the high school who had blue hair and the look in her eyes of someone who was preparing to be told she is too much. I told her she wasn't too much. She cried, and I pretended not to notice because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a teenager is act like their tears are rain that will pass without commentary. We held a community night at the diner on Main where the coffee is bottomless and the hush puppies come with butter whether you ask or not. We filled the back room with people who wanted to learn about breaker boxes and about how to call the fire department when your landlord tells you you're overreacting. Miss Hanley drew a diagram on a napkin with the blue pen because she didn't think the projector worked, and we all nodded like parishioners at a sermon we understood. Deputy Boone talked about reporting, about documentation, about why certain words matter in emails. Mr. Harrigan, whose entire job is tenderness inside logistics, told us what to do when funeral homes become places where truth is stored inadvertently. He said we were welcome to walk the hallway that families never walk, so we know what back doors exist and which ones are locked and why. There was a moment at that meeting when I realized I had become the person people looked for in a crowd when they didn't know where to stand. It scared me. Then it made me feel like I had a job I hadn't applied for, but had been doing in pieces since the morning I found my daughter's varsity jacket zippered into a wall. When Dan pled to obstruction and tampering, there were people in town who said he had suffered too and that he had not set the fire. Both things can be true. I did not want him to be a cartoon of a villain because cartoons don't teach anything except how to fear the dark. I wanted the people who loved him to sit with the way control can ruin a life even if your hands never strike a match. I wanted the men in his Bible study to sit with the way their friendship protected him from questions that might have saved a girl. I wanted the sheriff to look up and say on the record that he trusted the wrong person first and would not do it again. He did. It didn't fix it, but it put a line in the minutes that said, "We learned something the hard way." On a Wednesday morning in fall, leaves littering the sidewalk like confetti that missed its own party, I took the bus with a group of senior citizens to the State House in Raleigh because they needed bodies and seats to support a bill no one had paid much attention to a year earlier. They didn't know they were riding with a woman who had once believed her daughter had died in a space heater accident because a man in authority told her so. They told me about their grandkids and about the best place for biscuits within 20 miles. One of them pulled a plastic container from a tote bag and pressed slices of banana bread into my hands the way strangers sometimes feed you because they recognize you as a person who has not eaten enough for a long time. When the bill passed out of committee and then through the House with a margin that surprised even the sponsor, I didn't cheer. I exhaled something that had been lodged in my throat for 12 years. Maya's name wasn't on it. It didn't need to be. It's in my house, in the jacket on the hook, in the way I make coffee now, 2 scoops instead of 3 because if you drink too much coffee, you misunderstand your own adrenaline for conviction. A lot of small things changed. The fire department added a page to their website about what to do after a fire that is written in plain English. The funeral home added a line to their contract about access and storage and who can and cannot bring things in after hours. The schools added a section to civics class where teens practice making a call to a landlord who doesn't love being called. A scaffolding of sentences like ladders for them to climb when authority throws a blanket over their questions. Some nights, the quiet is still a wall I lean against because my body has practiced leaning for so long that standing without support makes it complain. Some nights, I dream the cedar closet breathes, and when I wake up, my house smells like lemon oil because I cleaned the floors before bed and forgot. Some mornings, I find myself on my back porch at dawn without remembering how I got there, watching the sky lift itself into day, and I think about the girls I've met in the last year who tell me they heard something at 3:27 and then tell me it was a dream, but their voices carry certainty. And I tell them that sometimes the world sends you a noise because you're the only one awake to hear it. Once, at the diner, a woman my age slid into the booth opposite me while I was dabbing jam off the edge of my biscuit and asked if the story I'd told in church was true. She had a daughter with an outlet and a landlord with a cousin at the county office and a husband who said not to start anything. I told her to call the number on the magnet we had made for the sheriff's department. I told her to call me if she needed a second voice to stand next to hers in a room and say the same fact. She cried and then apologized for crying, and I poured more coffee because if you give someone a drink while they cry, it makes the crying look like hydration and everyone feels less embarrassed. I have stopped wishing for the universe to return what it took in the form it took it. I've started asking for small things and naming them when they arrive. The girls at the high school call me Miss Lauren now, and when I show up to chaperone, they do not roll their eyes. The boys at the high school look me in the eye, and some of them look scared. And that is fine with me. They will grow up into men who understand that stories have witnesses, and that sometimes the witness is the woman in the second pew with a notebook and a locket. I kept thinking that the night my daughter called me would split my life into before and after, like a movie that cuts too clean. Instead, it worked like a needle, pulling the two sides toward each other with a thread I cannot see, but can feel when I run my hand across the seam. My life is the same house. The wall is patched, the paint is new, the light switch still flickers when the air conditioner kicks on because the electrical in this neighborhood is older than our hope. But someone is coming Thursday to look at it, and he will not be allowed to tell me it's nothing. When it rains here, it smells like wet pine and hot asphalt and the breath of the paper mill miles away. When it rains here, you can see who took their garbage cans in on time and who didn't by the way a street looks tidy or not. When it rains here, I think about the night of the fire and the neighbors in pajamas standing barefoot at the curb, and I think about the way we all called into our doorways to make sure the people inside were accounted for. We counted wrong that night. We believed the wrong voice. We told the wrong story because the right one hurt. And yet, when I think of my daughter's voice through the speaker of a phone at 3:27, I don't hear pain. I hear calm. I hear instruction. I hear a girl who knew that if she left a trail, I would learn to follow it, even if it meant pissing off a man who liked to be agreed with in public. I hear a girl who asked me to drink water and to sleep and to tell other girls that they aren't crazy when they smell something and the person next to them says that smell has always been there. There is a bench on the Greenway path behind the elementary school with a plaque that says, "For Maya, who told the truth even when it wasn't hers to tell alone." People sit on it and tie their shoes and check their phones, and sometimes they run their fingers over her name because it feels good to touch letters carved into something solid. Sometimes teenagers sit on it and kiss badly, and I do not mind, because benches are for living on, and because the alternate is teenagers kissing behind dumpsters, and there is enough rot in this town without adding metal stink to a first kiss. Once a month, I get a voicemail alert, even though the pink razor lives in an evidence bag now. The system pings my number in the middle of the night and says, "You have no new messages," in a voice that sounds a little apologetic, like the machine wants to be more helpful. I let it sit there until morning so that when my eyes open to the soft square of light on the ceiling, I can press play and hear something that is not silence, but not demand either. It is a reminder that lines carry signals, that information moves whether we are ready for it or not. It is a reminder that there are devices in walls we don't know about, and pings that arrive while we sleep, and closet panels that open if you insist. And that even when someone else closes the casket, or writes the report, or calls the bulldozer, another person can press a thumb into a seam and say, "No, not yet. We are not done here." People ask me if I believe in the supernatural. I tell them I believe in what I heard, and I believe in my daughter, and I believe in cedar and lemon oil and timer beeps and the needle on the timeline that keeps landing at 3:27 in the morning. I believe in the way the world will sometimes bend to the shape of your need if you name it without shame and then do the long paperwork of making it real. I believe in institutions that can learn and in stubborn middle-aged women with clipboards who refuse to be tired in front of elected officials. I believe in apologies that use the words, "I was wrong and I should have listened." I believe that if you tell the truth softly enough, it gets under people's skin. The first fall after we passed the county rule, I stood by the football field as the marching band practiced, and a girl in a red headband jogged past me and then doubled back because she recognized Maya's jacket. She pointed to the patch. "She'd have liked your headband," she said, young in a way that made me want to give her sunscreen and a list of books. I said, "She'd have liked your headband," She once bought a pair of red socks with babysitting money and called them her lucky socks and wore them even to church until someone noticed. The girl laughed. Then she grew serious, like kids do when they sense the end of a story that matters. She said, "I heard what you did." I said, "I didn't do it alone," because the story tastes better when shared, and because the lesson belongs to a town now, not to a woman with a locket. She said, "Still, thanks." She jogged off to a teammate, and the way she moved, loose and sure, and unafraid of how fast she could go, made me want to sit down on the bleachers and weep into the collar of my daughter's old jacket. Instead, I stayed where I was and let the sound of brass and drums fill me up, because if I've learned anything in the 12 years since my daughter died and the week since she called me, it's this. You have to let some of the noise you did not ask for be joy. At 3:27, on nights when sleep gives me a half hour, I sit on the edge of the bed with my feet on the rug and say things out loud that I used to send to a voicemail because I thought that was the only way to be heard. I say, "I love you." I say, "I'm going to take the car in for an oil change because the sticker says I should and you would make fun of me if I didn't." I say, "I made the banana bread with walnuts, even though the recipe says to leave them out for texture, and I know you to pick them out and line them up on the napkin like a science experiment." I say, "I am not going to shrink myself anymore so someone else can look bigger." I say, "Thank you." I used to believe death was the door that slams and leaves you on the wrong side, a heavy wood that will not budge even if you throw your full weight at it. Now I think of it like a wall with a seam. If you press your fingers along the baseboard long enough, there's a panel that gives. Behind it, there's a cold breath of air and a device with a small blinking light to remind you that the wires are still alive. And if you are lucky or stubborn or loved by a girl who understood that documentation is a gift, there is a zip you can pull and a jacket you can lift and a voice you will hear that tells you where to stand and what to say and who to call when everyone around you is so practiced at the old story that they forgot there are other versions. When the story ends on YouTube or at the diner or in a church gym that smells like basketball and bleach, I add this part for anyone who needs it but doesn't know how to ask. Do not let anyone control the story you tell about your life. If you need to write it down, write it down. If you need to film it, film it. If you need to call a number at 3:27 in the morning and say the sentence out loud to the empty air because that's the only way it will live anywhere but under your tongue, do that too. The universe isn't always kind. People are often lazy. Institutions like the sound of their own voices, but the seam is there. The panel opens. The cedar smells like memory, and the beep will guide you if you listen long enough. And if you find a jacket, put it on. Walk out your front door. The air outside is the same as it was before, and not at all the same, and your feet know the path by heart. I keep the letter she wrote. 2 pages, lined paper now, because my hands got damp the first dozen times I held it. Sometimes I take it out and read it at my kitchen table with the rooster magnet still crooked on the freezer, because grief and housekeeping share a sense of humor. I run my finger along the part where she wrote, "Don't let Dad control the story." And I whisper back, "Don't worry, honey, I won't let anyone." On my better days, I believe the universe sent me a phone call. On my bad days, I believe I made it up because I needed a reason to get out of bed. Either way, a town got a law, a man learned a lesson, a mother got a kind of peace that is more like a bench than a bed, and the girls in Cedar Grove learned to keep their own notebooks. The truth doesn't need us to be perfect. It needs us to be stubborn and kind and loud enough that even the men who prefer whispers can hear. If you need me, I'm a woman in a booth at the diner on Main with a jacket hung on the back of the seat and a notebook open to a page that says a thing I should have said sooner. Sit down. Tell me what you smell. Tell me what you hear. I will believe you. And if you call at 327, I will answer.